Welcome to Journaling with Nature, the podcast for those who want to turn curiosity into wonder, a pencil sketch into a rabbit hole of discovery, a moment of stillness into a life full of joy. I'm your host, Bethan Burton. Let's open the pages of our nature journals and explore this world together. Hello and welcome to episode 39. This is a really special episode and I'm so happy and excited to be able to share it with you today. It's really special for many reasons. This episode is an interview with Hani Ristiawan, a student of forest resources conservation who lives in Indonesia. I first met Hani through Instagram. He keeps an incredibly detailed nature journal and his photos document the tropical ecosystems around him. His journal is unique because he writes in Javanese script. This is one of the traditional scripts developed on the island of Java, but in practice this beautiful Javanese script has largely now been replaced by the Latin alphabet. So Hani's choice to use it in his nature journal is culturally meaningful. In his work, Hani knows the importance of preserving nature and the ecosystems that are being lost. And through this interview, you'll hear him describe how nature and culture are not separate from each other, and how this one act of keeping his nature journal in Javanese script is Hani's way of preserving his culture and reminding those who see his journal that this part of his cultural heritage is beautiful and important. This is the first episode of the Journaling with Nature podcast that I've done using the help of a translator. Esti Widyasari is the wonderful translator who was able to facilitate communication between Hani and I, and I'm so grateful to her for all the hard work that's gone into the creation of this episode. It took 2 recording sessions and a lot of editing to get this podcast finished, and it will be published twice, once in English and again in Indonesian. In this English version, you'll hear Hani's voice begin to answer the question in Indonesian, and then Esti's voice speaking his words in English. I feel so lucky to have been able to communicate with Hani through Esti and to be able to learn his story. His commitment to protecting nature and culture through his nature journal is deeply inspiring, and I'm happy to be able to share his story with you now. Let's listen. Hani, have you always loved nature, even as a child? Did you have nature around you when you were young?
Ya, jadi saya tinggal di pinggir kota.
I live in the suburb. So
di lokasi yang cukup padat.
It was in a fairly densely populated location, but I can still reach the nature. So there used to be a rice field near my house. There was also a yard back home. There was a garden that was taken care of by my grandmother. So that was where I spent my childhood, probably when I was in elementary school, getting to know and interacting with nature. That was where it started. And then because of the current development, I found out that my surrounding environment is very dynamic. So a lot of changes have occurred. So the rice field where I used to play on has turned into housing, buildings eventually. Then maybe before junior high school, or right in junior high school, I love playing. I love exploring with friends. In the village, in the countryside, bicycling or even walking around the rural areas. That was where I get a lot of experiences with the nature, with my friends at school. I tend to, meeting friends who like to explore has driven me deeper into loving or getting to know the nature around me.
tempat tinggal saya sendiri di Wonosobo.
As for the place where I live in Wonosobo,
kota kecil yang
it's a small town that is surrounded by mountains and hills.
Masih banyak terdapat sawah dan
and then there are so many rice fields and community plantations, community forests are still very well preserved. The local farming tradition in the form of agroforestry is also very, very well preserved here.
What a beautiful description. And I love how you talked about nature and friendship going together, how important it is to have that experience of being in nature with friends as well, and how that can deepen your connection. I'd like to talk about the seasons. Many people are used to talking about natural cycles in terms of 4 seasons: spring, summer, autumn, winter. But for you in the tropical climate, it's not really applicable. I'd love to hear you speak more about that, about the seasonal changes you experience and how you classify the seasons around you.
Ya benar, ya di sini
yes, right.
Di Jawa, di Indonesia itu
here,
hanya terdapat 2
in Java,
musim,
in Indonesia,
dan
there are only 2 seasons, rainy and dry season.
Maka untuk di daerah tropis ini memang agak harus
so in tropical areas,
melihat perubahan-perubahan yang
you do really have to be even more observant to see the changes that occur along the season. And then
ternyata ketika sudah mengamati lebih dalam,
it turned out that when we look closer, it turned out that the differences do exist, and
dengan begitu,
and by doing so,
kita mengetahui bahwa
we
ternyata
could
ada perubahan yang
finally notice
cukup atau agak signifikan
that
dari penghujan dan
there are
musim
quite
kering,
significant or rather significant changes from the rainy season to dry season, like that. And maybe it would be more complicated if the area, such as where I live in Wonosobo, or also where I study in Bogor, which has quite high precipitation rate, and so the differences between the dry season and the rainy seasons are not so obvious. In the end, we have to explore deeper to discover the changes that occur there. And they do occur, especially, for example, the blooming season for flowering plants or bearing fruit season for tropical fruits are very, very, they do occur. And then, at the beginning of my nature journaling, I haven't focused on the changes that occur every season or every month, but I rather focused on the biodiversity. At the beginning of nature journaling, I focused more on plant diversity. Then, perhaps in the past year, I finally got interested in seeing the differences between each season, the changes that occur along with the seasons here.
That's wonderful that the nature journal can be a way of recording the changes, the subtle changes, because it's the same here in Australia where I am. The changes aren't obvious between through the year, and so it's like you say, you have to tune in, you have to be more aware and more observant, and it's wonderful that the nature journal can help you do that.
Iya, dan bisa.
Yes.
Jadi,
and you can.
Iya, betul sekali.
So yes, that's absolutely right.
Kemudian akhirnya saya menemukan bahwa
and then I finally found
tumbuhan atau pohon-pohon itu
that the plants or trees would begin to bloom in between the seasonal change. It could be in the beginning of the season, at the switch between at the end of the rainy season to the beginning of the dry season, or the end of the dry season to the beginning of the rainy season. It's like that usually. Those are when lots of plants bloom and begin to bear fruit.
Ada pula ternyata yang tumbuhan.
And then there are also plants that bloom throughout the year, regardless of the season. Even though in certain months when the rainfall decreases, they keep blooming or sprouting.
That's wonderful. Wonderful observations. So you're a student of forest resources conservation, and I'd like to talk about that, about your studies. Do you do field studies for your university classes?
Iya, kami melakukan beberapa
we do several field trips for several courses.
Biasanya yang berhubungan dengan
usually those related to ecology,
baik tumbuhan maupun satwa,
both plants and animal.
Ada pula mata kuliah tentang manajemen.
There are also courses on conservation area management, where we also conduct site visits, seeing firsthand what is happening on the field.
Dan disitulah saya menemukan, saya mencatat.
And they are where I can discover, where I take notes. They are where I recorded some of the entries in my nature journal.
Did you begin your nature journal inspired by your studies, or did the nature journal come first?
Ya, saya membuat nature journal setelah terinspirasi.
I made my nature journal after being inspired by my studies. So, I first started the nature journal when I took the course of forest ecology.
Saya mencatat pula jenis-jenis yang saya temukan.
That was when I also recorded the species that I encountered while doing field lab at the campus forest. I did the field lab of forest ecology at the campus forest, and then I took notes and drew in my sketchbook. That was where the first entry of my nature journal was the flora I encountered during field lab for perhaps almost
lebih dari setengah semester.
More than half a semester.
Ya, jadi
yes.
Ya, jadi di awal-awal itu sampai setengah
that
semester,
was the beginning for up to half of that semester. I filled in my nature journal with plants that I found during forest ecology field lab. After that, there are many more field trips and other courses which finally take me to conservation areas so I can further explore what I can find during each of those field trips.
I love that beginning. Hani, can you describe the sort of work that you'll do when you finish your studies?
Jadi, saya ingin sekali
I would love to.
Konservasi sumber daya hutan itu.
So, because forest resources conservation has quite a broad scope, ranging from ecology,
forest
ecology,
satwa liar, kemudian
wildlife ecology,
pemanfaatan,
and then there are also utilizations of conservation of flora and fauna,
hubungan antara,
and then there is the relationship between human and forest,
ethnobiology, kemudian
or known as ethnobiology,
manajemen dan kebijakan,
and then up to management and policy. So, forest resources conservation is very broad, and perhaps we think of it as only dealing with protecting forest resources, but it's actually more than that. Therefore, the options for the future are very diverse. However, what I would choose perhaps, what I want in the future, is to become an expert in plant ecology, and plant conservation. Maybe that's what I want to explore more. And I want to be more.
Dan ingin saya saya ingin menjadi lebih tertarik begitu di.
I want to be more interested in pursuing a profession in plant ecology and plant conservation.
What do you love about plants in particular more than study of animals, say? What draws you to plants?
Ya, jadi karena mungkin ini akar mengakar agak jauh.
Because maybe it is rooted further with flora. Plants have deeper roots in me. So from the small garden in front of my house, that was when I started to know and like plants. And then I started collecting. The first time I collected and planted plants was when I was probably 9 or 8 years old. 8 or 9 years old, when I was started trying to grow my own crops. The first thing I planted was curcuma. So I planted curcuma, and then from then on, I got really interested in farming, in gardening. From that moment on, I started to collect various plants. I even grew wild plants. I planted ferns. And from then on, I got really interested in plants. And I also encountered more plants when I go hiking on the mountains. When I was playing, exploring, we can say, with my friends, as I mentioned before. And then when I got into the university, I started to get even more interested in plants, in forests. And there was a moment when I was hiking on a mountain, when I was apprenticing in a national park. There, I got captivated to mountain plants, plants that grow on the mountains. And then I also found this book, the book entitled Mountain Flora of Java by Javanese. It really got me interested in plant ecology, in plant conservation, and maybe in mountain vegetation. Specifically, and I have chosen one species in particular, which I will thoroughly explore in my research as the subject of my final project, that is kantong semar or nepenthes. Nepenthes that grow on a mountain called Mount Bismo. Mount Bismo is nearby, still within my regency, still in Wonosobo, and I would love to study that species more thoroughly.
Is it the pitcher plant, Hani?
Yes, that's pitcher plants.
Yes.
Nepenthes.
I love nepenthes. I think they're amazing, so fascinating. Carnivorous plants are generally fascinating, but nepenthes are just so beautiful. And yeah, I was going to ask you, because in Java you have such unique plants like nepenthes and also Rafflesia and some amazing orchids. I was going to ask you if you have a favorite plant, but I guess nepenthes is your favorite.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I understand. I'd love for you to describe a little about nepenthes. Describe what nepenthes is as a genus and just a little bit about it for people who don't know.
Ya, jadi untuk nepenthes atau kantong semar.
Yes, so
itu merupakan
nepenthes or kantong semar. It is a carnivorous plant that has a structure, that has a mechanism to get its nutrients by trapping other organisms. It could be insects or other arthropods. By using the modified structure of the organs that are modified into pouch-like structures. in which they have digestive enzymes that can extract nutrients from the trapped prey.
Kantong semar atau Nepenthes ini sendiri unik.
Kantong semar or Nepenthes itself is unique.
Pusat keanekaragamannya berada di kawasan.
Because the center of its biodiversity is in the Indonesian region, within the Malaysia biogeography. In Java alone, there are at least two species. There are two endemic species which have been discovered. Species that only exist in the island of Java. And that's what got me interested in researching Nepenthes in Java, since there are only two species, and both are endemic compared to neighboring islands such as Sumatra and Kalimantan, which have dozens of species. And in Java itself, because of its very dynamic development, so how will these two species of Nepenthes would eventually be affected? Or maybe how we could develop a strategy to protect or conserve these two species in Java later on.
It's an amazing plant, and I think it's a wonderful research project. So tell me about nature journaling. What do you love about nature journaling? What does it bring to you?
Jadi ketika saya nature journaling,
when I go nature journaling,
saya jadi lebih sadar ya, saya lebih menyadari alam di sekitar saya. Kemudian
I became more aware. I became more aware of the nature around me.
Diketuk oleh perubahan dinamis.
Then perhaps my door was knocked on by the dynamic changes that were happening around me. And for as long as, maybe during my lifetime, I have seen various events, natural events that occur, starting from, but perhaps in Java itself, because Java is a location that is geologically dynamic as well. I had experienced volcanic ash rain because of the erupting volcanoes nearby. And then I saw landslides nearby. There were landslides. And then there are storms, or perhaps a long dry season, which leads to forest fire. I witnessed them myself from where I live in Wonosobo itself. It also includes the changes that I mentioned earlier, the changes of rice fields and gardens into offices, into buildings. And at that moment, at first, perhaps I didn't know with what I can express them or how to record them. But then I found that with nature journaling, it becomes my media to record the things that I see, to record all the feelings that I feel, including the feelings towards the changes that have occurred, especially in flora, yes, because I love flora more. So I have the passion for documenting what I have encountered, what I have seen. Because we couldn't tell, perhaps because of the dynamics of my environment, the flora or fauna that I have encountered would still exist in that location later on. So it is based on the change that occur, and I want to record, and therefore I can be more sensitive and feel closer to the nature around me.
That's beautiful. I love how you describe that nature journaling can be a place to put down your feelings about what's lost and also a record of what's lost, because we might not see these things in the future because of development. So interesting. Thank you. So you have very detailed drawings and paintings in your journal, and I'm wondering about art and how you came to art, how you developed your art skill.
Jadi untuk alasan saya membuat gambar yang cukup detail,
the reason why I made quite detailed pictures is because it began from
mata kuliah sebelum ekologi hutan, sebelum saya memulai ini, yaitu
a course I took before for ecology. Before I started this, it was dendrology.
Struktur dan morfologi pohon,
the study about the structure and morphology of trees, plants in general, and more specifically trees. So then, because I was required to draw in detail the morphology of leaves, morphology of the parts such as leaves or other organs for identification purposes, and then it continues to my nature journal process. So as a result, when I draw, I have this mindset of, well, this must be detailed, and when I see the picture, I have to, or when other people look at my picture, they must be able to identify, oh, this is the species, right?
Karena mungkin jadi
and perhaps
untuk mengeksplor ini ya,
because it has become something to explore my sensitivity or my skill at being able to identify and to describe species of plants. So I must, from the detailed pictures, I can identify or I can describe again the characteristics of a particular species. As for the development of my technique in creating my nature journal, at the beginning I did use a pen. And then, because I didn't have the confidence yet to use other media, I only did some sort of a sketch with a pen. So at the beginning I did use that. And then in my second year, I just started using watercolors. I'm exploring the use of watercolor media here. And this is quite challenging for me because I have never really learned using the watercolor method. And so I thought myself, I'm learning on my own. I watch tutorials from YouTube, or by using my own sense, going with my own feelings. I make observation, how can I actually get good result, and I sometimes do my own experiment to develop like that. And then sometimes I sometimes miss those days. I want to just immediately sketch using a pen until now. It's just that maybe this is still a part of exploring watercolors for painting.
And do you like to sketch in the field, or do you take notice of what you see in the field and then sketch at home?
Biasanya saya sebenarnya
usually
sebagian besar yang saya membuat nature journal itu saya gambar di rumah.
For most of what I make in this nature journal, I drew them at home.
Mungkin karena tuntutan harus detail itu. Jadi untuk kalau misal di lapangan,
maybe because of that demand to be detailed. So it would be possible to draw in such detail if, for example, I was in the field. Usually I take photograph of what I discovered, and then, well, I also take detailed photos of what I discover. For example, I would take pictures of leaf from the top side, bottom side, from the base, and or other special characteristic. I took a detailed photo, and then after that, in addition to photograph, I may also take some samples if allowed, and if there were enough for me to take them. For example, I will bring home a leaf or a branch, and I would draw them back at home.
Karena juga pengalaman juga saya pernah
because based on my experience, I was once on a mountain where the terrain is quite difficult and the weather can change rapidly. So it would be quite difficult to immediately draw in the field. It may even be impossible. But then I can draw directly, like several of my nature journal that I have created during this pandemic. When I can't go anywhere, it is possible to observe, to draw directly, because it is in my own garden. So I can observe and the objects directly. But when I'm on the field, such as in the forest, or when I'm on a field trip, it would not be possible to draw immediately on the field due to the weather factors and terrain conditions.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. I can imagine being in the forest and the weather is changing and all sorts of challenging environmental complications can make it difficult. I'd love to know about some natural subjects that you've been exploring in your nature journal recently. You said you had been doing some things in your garden. What do you see in your garden?
Yes. Ya jadi
so because during this pandemic, I just stay at home. Being at home for 8 months, I couldn't directly explore the pristine environment, such as forests or others. And I live in an urban environment. So during the pandemic, I can only explore my own garden, or parks, and urban forests that are located nearby, or gardens that are still close to my house. Because there are mobility restrictions, and then there was the International Nature Journaling Week event that he organized. So that was when I started to realize that there's no need to go to the forest to see the nature. So I started to realize that my garden turns out to be really amazing. It turns out that there are so many things I can explore in my own garden. All these times I have never realized it. In my garden I was just collecting or taking care of plants. But during this pandemic, I've learned that my little garden has treasured so much wonder. During this pandemic, during these 8 months, I have made some records. I recorded the plants among my collection that were blooming or bearing fruit or sprouting. And then I explored places around me, such as the urban forest that I mentioned earlier. It turns out that in the urban forest near my house, it has very interesting atmosphere and plants diversity. All these times, I have been taking it for granted. But it turns out that I can feel closer to the nature around me. So starting from there, I can finally to produce a wowing or excellent nature journal, you don't necessarily have to go to forest. It turns out that my own garden, in an urban location, it is still possible to create and discover interesting stuffs. Yes, it's possible. And also, I started to move on to observe the changes that occur in each season. I finally got attracted to that. In addition to the attraction of biodiversity, not just recording what kind of plants I see, but also the changes that occur in those plants.
I love that. I love it. It makes me feel so good to hear that, because I think it's a really powerful part of nature journaling, that it can make us see that the things close to our home, in the garden, in the sky near us, it's something really powerful about nature journaling, that it can make us see our own environment as amazing, even when it's simple or something we've seen before or we think we know. It's wonderful. So you mentioned to me that you have two missions for nature journaling, that you have a conservation mission and that you have a cultural mission. And I'd love for you to talk about that, your two missions, and about keeping your nature journal in Javanese script, and these two missions that you mentioned to me.
Jadi misi pertama yaitu misi konservasi.
So the first mission, the conservation mission, it is as I mentioned earlier. So I recorded the various species that I encountered around me. I recorded the changes that occurred. I put that within my first mission, which is the conservation mission. Because here, at least I have recorded what once exists in a location, the condition that once occur in a location. And then perhaps this conservation mission is also because my educational background is in conservation. So recording or inventorying the existing species is indeed necessary for the future. And then for the second mission, the cultural mission, I have always been, from the very beginning, since I first created my nature journal, I've been using Javanese script. So this Javanese script, although the Javanese script that I use is a modern Javanese script, but still, I kind of have this passion for preserving and continuing to use this script, because in general, the script has not been formally used by the community who owns it. So, also because of that, because it has not been used formally, many people eventually lost the skill of using it. And because we're not accustomed to it, it is my mission here to keep using this script and to campaign the use of the script. Because this is a part, even though it is also modernized script, it is the development of the ancient Javanese script that have existed before. So, and this is a part of Javanese culture, the culture of my ancestor. So I have some sort of obligation to preserve it. And also, this nature journal has become one of my means to engage in a campaign the Archipelago Script Campaign. So it's a campaign to preserve and to use traditional scripts that subsist throughout Indonesia.
Wow.
There's more.
Jadi selain itu saya juga ingin
additionally
menyadarkan bahwa
I also want to remind that our ancestors,
orang Jawa bahkan atau
the Javanese people, and even the entire Indonesian people
sebenarnya punya latar belakang yang
have in reality a very close relations with the nature.
Jadi saya ingin menyadarkan
so I want to remind us all that culture and nature are related to one another. So we cannot separate them. And then the background that people in Indonesian archipelago in general, in the past, were very dependent and very closely connected with the nature. So they observed, for example, in Java, the Javanese people in the past, they observed the natural changes around them. There are seasonal changes, so they eventually developed a traditional cultivating calendar. It was one of the evidences of how culture and nature interact. And I'm also here to sort of raise that spirit again. So we, as the people of this nation, we have always been close to the nature. And also that culture and nature are inseparable.
That's so interesting. I love the way you are using your nature journal to preserve what's precious in nature, things that we have the potential to lose, and also what's precious in Javanese culture as well. It's the same, exactly like you say. They're inseparable, they're not different. So we have the potential to lose these precious natural wonders, and we also have the potential to lose this precious cultural script. And I love your mission. I think it's really wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Hani, thank you for being here. It's been so amazing to talk with you, to explore your world, your experience of nature journaling, and I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Hani. I've been so inspired by his commitment to preserving the Javanese script in his nature journal and this important insight that nature and culture are interlinked and inseparable. Visit the show notes of this episode to find links to Hani's Instagram page where you can see his beautiful nature journal. There is also a link to the International Nature Journaling Week website where you can find a page called What Does Nature Journaling Mean to You? On that page, people from all around the world, including Hani, have shared videos of themselves speaking in their own language about nature journaling and nature connection. We have videos on that page in so many different languages, including Indonesian, Zulu, Spanish, Japanese, Russian, Norwegian, Italian, German, and English, and I'm so looking forward to watching this page grow and grow more over the years. International Nature Journaling Week is starting on the 1st of June, and it's good timing that this episode should come out now. Learning from people all across the globe and sharing our love of nature is what International Nature Journaling Week is all about. If you go to naturejournalingweek.com, you'll find all the information about the event. There'll be live nature journaling workshops twice a day during the whole week that are free, and everyone is welcome to join. We'll explore a new theme each day and go deeper into all the different aspects of nature journaling. This is going to be a week of celebrating nature journaling and connecting with people across the world. I really hope you'll be there too. Thank you so much for listening. See you next week.